Thistlebrook was an innocuous town shrouded in perpetual murkiness from the dense thickets surrounding it. Its history was as tangled as the underbrush, home to half-remembered tales and whispered warnings. The town wore its age heavily, every building creaking with the weight of stories best left untold. Visitors didn't often come here. It harbored a foreboding that discouraged the curious. And yet, for those who called it home, the ominous air seemed as natural as the very act of breathing. Amber was not a native, but rather an unwitting transplant, having moved there 3 months ago to escape her own demons from the bustling city. She thought that the quiet, stoic nature of Thistlebrook, its stubborn detachment from the passage of time, might ease her weary mind. However, she found no solace in the omnipresent twilight and seemed trapped in an unsettling repetition. The villagers averted their gaze, speaking in hushed tones and glancing over their shoulders at invisible pursuers. Her interactions with the townsfolk were limited, save for old Mr. Finn at the general store, whose eyes gleamed with a fractured kindness, and Mrs. Gardner, an ancient woman who ruled the town's library, her fingers eternally stained with ink. There was a rumor that she came from a lineage of witches, though Amber thought that more amusing than menacing. Amber's apartment was nestled in a building that must have been stately a century ago. Now it sagged like an old horse, weary and resigned. The frets and rattles of the building at night spoke with a voice of its own, moaning secrets through the pipes and door hinges. Her window offered a view of nothing but the forest, a black sea that hemmed the town in like a giant, looming wall. It was during one of those opiate nights, when sleep evaded her, that she first saw them, the hollow-eyed men. The clock had just marked the arrival of midnight with a chilling chime echoing across the empty rooms, when Amber felt a presence that made the hairs on her neck rise like silken threads in a static charge. Her eyes drifted unwillingly to the window. There, standing at the edge of the woods, were figures draped in darkness, their shapes only partly revealed by fractured moonlight. Tall, unnaturally so, and eerily thin, they seemed sculpted from shadows themselves. Their faces were indistinct, but the hollowness of their eyes, blank voids that swallowed the soul of whatever dared to meet their gaze, was undeniable. Chilled to the core, Amber retreated hastily from the window, heart rattling against her ribs like a caged bird. She tried to convince herself it was a trick of the light, a fanciful manifestation of her fraying mind. Yet, no matter how much she willed it to be so, she could not erase the image from her thoughts, lingering there like the after-image of a lightning flash burned into the dark canvas of her memory. As the days clumsily unfurled, the townsfolk grew perturbed. Amber overhead snippets of frantic conversations, intonations of impending dread, warnings etched deeply into their voices. "They're coming again," said a disembodied voice one morning, drifting from the clustered heads at the bar of the Rusty Nail, the town's only pub. A tremor racked Amber's spine as she listened, an unwilling eavesdropper to the tale of the hollow-eyed men, beings neither alive nor truly dead, cursed to roam the edges of the forest. It was said that they were guardians of Thistlebrook, or perhaps its prisoners, bound to the land since time immemorial. Entrappers of souls, feeders on despair, these specters existed in tragic liminality, agents of some greater, unfathomable design. Restless dreams haunted Amber, an insomnia that clawed her mind raw. Then came a night when her resolve broke. She ventured to the library, desperate for knowledge, for clarity amidst chaos. Mrs. Gardner stood behind the counter, the speculative gaze of one who had seen too much and understood even less. "You seek answers you might not wish to find," the librarian cautioned, her voice bearing the smeared specter of an echo. "I must know," Amber insisted, though her voice broke like a poorly struck match. Mrs. Gardner nodded, then pointed to an inconspicuous leather-bound journal kept in a locked cabinet. "This might hold what you seek, but heed the warnings. Understanding can be as much a curse as ignorance." The journal was filled with sketches, grotesque sketches that depicted the hollow-eyed men in terrifying clarity. Each page was littered with annotations in a frenzied scrawl, a descent into madness or enlightenment, perhaps. Among the entries, one passage stood out, its ink dry with time yet bleeding with menace. Do not look into their eyes, for they see beyond the veil of mortality into the yawning abyss. Despite this, Amber felt an irresistible pull, a gravity beyond mere curiosity. Back in her apartment, she lowered the blinds, her movements mechanical with resolute intent. She immersed herself in the journal until sleep came unwillingly at last, cocooning her in the realm of abstract dread. That night they invaded her dreams, the hollow-eyed men surrounding her, whispering truths that were more lies, shadows collapsing into ungraspable forms. The forest roared around them, alive, imprisoning. She felt herself implode beneath their hollow stare, drawn into the void of their existence, where time ceased to matter and despair was infinite.